Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the System 2 podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of having David on for the second time. The first time was too good. We end up using the whole time talking about everything but what you're currently doing. So it's great to have you on now to tell us more about Storyline. And people should definitely check out the first episode to get more background on David, although you can also just start here and learn about what he's doing. David, maybe you can give us a quick intro background on what got you to today, but then we'll spend the rest of the episode talking about Storyline.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, thanks again for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to have the second part to the story. I've always been deeply passionate about storytelling. My father was a great storyteller. I loved hearing stories multiple times, telling stories, and I think as I was going through high school, trying to kind of figure out what my superpower might be and how do I try to start refining it early, to kind of get ahead, I realized that I love telling stories. I loved using a combination of music and visuals and building anticipation. And so I got really deep into video at a pretty young age. Thanks to the first MacBook, made that quite easy. I remember my parents finally kind of gave in to helping me get my first Final Cut Pro subscription and my first MacBook. And then I just went really deep down that rabbit hole. Created a bunch of videos for my high school teachers and then ended up selling some to my high school teachers, built a DVD series. And so all of that was by the age of, 17, 18. And then coming out of that, I tried to kind of use this power of storytelling, figure out, okay, not everybody's going to pay me to make these videos. So I kind of leaned into web. And web became a place that, there's still a tremendous amount of storytelling in a great website. The reveal, the order, the scale, the proportions. And so that kind of became my first canvas where I tried to take my love and turn it into money. And during that time, I realized, wow, I think this is called marketing. And I never really kind of pursued that with any intention, but I think I realized that video, storytelling, business, communicating with customers, winning new customers, I was like, that's marketing. So I kind of owned this idea by maybe 19 that I'm like, oh, maybe marketing. Maybe I'm good at marketing. Maybe that's where the storytelling kind of hits the rubber hits the road. And then from there, web turned into software. Software landed me towards data. And there was this kind of crazy thing that happened, 2000, maybe it was like 2002 to 2007. It was like the birth of social media. People had to start spending money on digital. They had to have a strategy on digital. And so there was this window that opened for me that was very precious. And I was young. I had no pedigree. I didn't even have a college degree. And I needed to lean on being really creative, really fast, affordable, but I could be the digital guy. And because the digital guy was new. So a 50-year-old digital guy wasn't better than a 21-year-old digital guy. So that was my first moment that I was like, I can sprint here and try to be somebody despite not having the history, the experience, because this thing's being written as we go. And so that was a moment that was very exciting to me because I was like, okay, all these sacrifices I had made on not going to college, like this could be a moment where that becomes worth it. And so I pursued that with vigor, ended up winning some large accounts like Palm Wonderful and Fiji Water and Wonderful Pistachios and Pabst Brewing Company and all this stuff. And basically brands that had a really strong heartbeat, generally were category leaders. We started forming some chemistry where what I was saying and what the team I was building, like we were doing things that were resonating. They kind of loved the digital edge and this idea that we were like fresh ideas. We were not carrying print campaigns or TV campaigns into digital. We were doing digital in a digital way. And that really got me to cut my teeth on like the next level of storytelling and interactivity across social media and mobile and web. And so we kind of just became those guys. But then I had this thing inside of me that was brewing that made me really uncomfortable, which was the more we were growing, the more revenue we were generating, more clients we had, there was more pressure on validating what value we were creating. And unfortunately, at the time, that value was determined by how many email subscribers you got, how many likes you got on Facebook, how many Twitter followers you got. And so while we were building and building and selling new, places you should be exposed in the digital realm, I would say I felt a little inauthentic in how our value was being measured by these, I mean, some would argue they're very real measures of success. For me, there was something that felt very short of a Facebook like or the quantity of Facebook likes determining how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars you're spending with us are yielding outcomes, right? Because once a like comes, it's like a pretty big chasm between that and I'm making money, I'm gaining, I'm generating more value, I'm outrunning my competition. So we created a new product off of that, which was all of our clients basically did not have, a way to connect customers to their products. And so we wanted to do that. We wanted to help them find their destinations. We called it Destiny. And it was the first time that suddenly the need to use real data happened. And so we very quickly put together a really great creative experience as an application. But then we started finding data providers that could fuel it. And the second I touched real sales data, everything changed for me. It was like taking a bath in like authenticity and real truth. And the contrast between that and Facebook likes and email subscribers and was so vast, I could never go back. And so that to me kind of marked, I'd say, kind of chapter two. First chapter was be the digital guy. Chapter two was be the data guy. And I went down that rabbit hole as deep as you could. I mean, it was an 8.5 year journey. I moved to Chicago kind of at a moment's notice to do it. And I started to stitch together software that told stories with data that had truth. And I just rinse and repeated that for 8.5 years, built a successful company around a ton of incredible people. And I had a role to play. And most days of the week, I felt like I was using a superpower. And it was not that it just came easier to me, but I was just so in flow because I got to do my two favorite things. I got to be a protector of truth and an accumulator of more truth. And I got to be a storyteller, both combined together. They created this incredible chemical reaction that I loved. And I ultimately knew people loved it because they kept spending more money on it as we kept scaling.
And just one question on that. You keep talking about the truth side of it. Were the likes, all these vanity metrics, were they lies? Was there a big divergence between what people thought they were getting when they were getting all these likes and what was happening to the revenues?
No, I wouldn't say they were lies. I would say they were distractions, right? Like it wasn't not important. Like you had to do that. So it had to be part of the strategy. I think it was more of a disappointment. I maybe had a higher bar for myself, for my company. I was so thankful that that was where the bar was because we were able to scale our business and be relevant. And frankly, measuring likes and stuff was cheap and easy to do. But at the time it was the bar. So we weren't below the bar, but we couldn't break through the bar either. And maybe that was what was a little more of a struggle is I wanted to be on the side of making brands more intelligent, more powerful, more insightful, more strategic. And I kind of felt like at the end of the day, likes were a way of saying, how much did I get in exchange for the amount of money I spent? Whereas when you're delivering truth in a way that's more accessible and more insightful and more actionable, I guess I felt like I was helping drive the growth of the business more proactively on the truth side than I was on the marketing side, who was just justifying the spend. And so I think it was maybe I was just ready for more. I kind of have that happen. I go through these chapters, 3 years, 6 years, 7 years. And then I tend to kind of have this new challenge I'm trying to tackle. And so it was just time. The opportunity presented itself. The company spins, had an incredibly serendipitous connection with the CEO. And the timing was right. But I definitely crossed the bridge and I never went back after touching real data and figuring out how to be somebody who earned the right to bring it to market.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting because there's some element in the beginning of novelty. You start posting on social media and you get people to give you likes. In the beginning, it's not that significant, but then it gets more significant. It's like, oh, wow, I'm pretty popular. And you get like wrapped up into that popularity metric. And then at some point, you're like, wait, but is this actually translating to, is this the thing that I should be measuring? Is it translating to actual sales? Is there like what's the business impact? Like, I fine, I'm popular now, but am I also more profitable? And yeah, so it's cool to see the data side come in. What was happening on the brand side? Were they also quick to understand the value that real data has, or did it require you to do some evangelizing in the beginning?
So that data company had existed, 10, 11 years prior. They already had established this incredible foundation of trust. They were the only company that could deliver this data. They had a high focus on the natural products industry. And so they were already weaponized, I would say. My entry into that business had a lot more to do with scaling the accessibility of that data, making that data automatically drive more utility, right? Like not waiting for somebody to subscribe, pull down the data, build an application, let their customers know just having kind of off the shelf capabilities that were more designed to say, I'm an investor. What brands should I be investing in based on these levels of growth or these types of attributes? I'm a client and I want to connect my customers to where my newest products are available. I want to generate couponing campaigns at these specific stores, to compete with these specific competitors. Like these were more kind of bespoke products that were using the raw data, but the actionability of it was represented through the software. And that was kind of the synergy is I was the digital side of that story. I was the touch point. They were the data. So the synergy was the more value we created through applications, the more clients wanted to spend, but also the more leverage we had to go and secure more data because they saw that we had these incredible outlets to not only generate more revenue, but ultimately create more value in the market. And the whole thing, I'd say about 4 or 5 years in, it all really started to create this flywheel that felt kind of predictable. And there was this really exciting formula. And that led to, should we expand to new territories? Should we expand to new channels? Should we expand to new product lines? So that kind of almost became a playground. I described it as like a data playground. And it was like, what's the next ride that we're going to put out here that's going to help the industry kind of thrive? And so that was, again, I spent less time about the data and more time about, I'm going to make something accessible that's never been made this accessible.
Can you double click a little bit on that? We have a lot of people in our industry that have, data companies, have started data companies. At first, at least within the finance vertical, it's somewhat easy to sell to one or two big hedge funds. They're very sophisticated. They can consume the raw data, and it feels like, oh, this is easy. I can do this forever. But pretty soon that market dries up. There's only a handful of those types of players. It resonates in terms of that transition from, I just have a raw data asset. Some people are advanced enough to use it, but how do I make it accessible to others? How do I create more products around it? How do I take that next leap? And then it's also the flywheel components. Once you do that, then you can get more data and the whole thing builds upon itself. So maybe just talk a little bit more about that strategy or advice you'd have for people that are starting out with just pure data and they're thinking about what to do next and how to potentially productize it.
Yeah, I mean that's a really tough problem, and I'd say it's maybe a little more friction filled now than ever, just because of the speed of which the cost of technology has come down, the barriers of entry of engineering and data science has come down. So we had a phenomenon at the last business that we had so many companies that said, "Oh, I'm sitting on this data. It's worth a ton of money. What are you willing to give me for it?" And my CEO of Spins would joke. He's like, I don't want more data. Everybody thinks monetizing data is easy. It is not easy. It's super hard. Most of the time it fails. So having raw data in our mind is not a business. It certainly can be, but I really think it's about this vertical integration where you can create more certainty, right? It's not to say you might not have great data, might not be worth a ton, and you might not get people to subscribe for a decade, but it's a lot less stable than saying I'm going to kind of I'm going to solve multiple problems for you at once. One might be the raw material, the intelligence. Maybe I'm the only one that has it. Maybe I'm the only one that enriches it in this particular way. But like my personal kind of passion and skill over the years has really been delivery. It's like the last mile engagement of where that value translates hands, right? And so that's been my specialty. That was why the chemistry between myself and the last business was great, because they were all about data accumulation and enrichment. And then, there was a drop off. And so my advice would be work your way back for what the data could be useful for and question whether the ideal delivery of that data exists. And if it doesn't, that might be a huge part of your moat. Even if you've been a data person and not an application or a software person, merging with the company, partnering with the company, creating a distribution network that you control versus a bunch of clients where you just give it away for a fee and hope that they don't use your own data against you to replace you at some point. It feels like it's missing a couple ingredients that may give you more long-term security and certainty of outcome. And so that was my experience. I've seen very successful data companies. I've also seen most successful data companies pivot into starting to build some proprietary tooling around how to make the most use of that data and not rely on others to do it on their behalf. That would be the thing I would kind of probably double click on for those people.
No, I love it. So then what? Talk us through what happened
So
next.
So at the end of that journey, I started getting a little bit of an itch because I started trying to break out of just delivery through BI tools and wanted to focus on how do we create more bespoke surgical stories. And so we started creating these products that were creating these like really cool, succinct PDFs that were really designed to almost be like a 2-3 page summary about a promotion. And here's when it occurred, and here's what it cost, and here's how it did. And so it was almost like taking an answer to a question and creating a prepackaged story for it. And it was a very quick revenue generating product. We kind of built it into the supply chain where everybody that did a promotion at a particular store got this at the end, almost like a receipt, right? Where they didn't have to go and fish through a bunch of data. They kind of like had their perfect little summary waiting for them at the end of that month. And I mean, that thing brought me a lot of joy because I was just like, it was a great story, super convenient to consume, saved a ton of time. We got to be fully in control of the narrative. And I was like, I want to do more of these. I actually think this is the future of how brands or companies across different industries, sophisticated or not, can very clearly get the right answer to the right question in a very convenient way. And
And
that
and
got me,
and these
oh, go ahead.
stories were meant to be consumed like internally with that brand. So after they ran a promotion, who was the audience? Was it for the
Yeah, it
marketing
would
team
be
to
the
take it?
brand. It would be for the brand, but it would also be for the category buyer at the store. And this is where kind of the single point of truth thing needed to, I'd say, reach a new level, because one of the big pieces of feedback we got from our retail partners was that they would spend an inordinate amount of time when a brand would show up with a deck and put a spin on the story. And that retailer, imagine managing 300 brands in the chips category, or sorry, 300 products, maybe 25 brands. And every one of them is coming to you with a different thing. And some of it is rooted in data, and some of it's a little embellished, and some of it is using this data source versus that data source. And so one of the opportunities was we're going to create ground truth. And we're going to agree with the retailers about what the way you should measure a promotion is and what kind of KPIs they're looking for, and give the brand that same truth and allow them to come together and say, at our core, there's 32 numbers that we're going to talk about. And anything outside those numbers are anecdotes. But like, they wanted to streamline how to align on truth and next steps and actionability rather than have to deconstruct a long deck, figure out what was real, what was not, what they trust, what they don't. And that's where I kind of saw, wow, okay, there's this next generation of not only accessibility, bespoke intelligence, but also like how much more efficient it was making the interaction between these stakeholders on a common goal, but in a much more efficient way. And so that chemistry was like fascinating to me. It was super lightweight, but super high impact. And so I started kind of chasing that. I kind of started chasing that. And that's what led me to, why can't we deliver enterprise data like a Netflix series? And that became, I'd say, the beginning of chapter 3 for me, was all the way back to video, which is kind of where it started. And so it was storytelling, data, and now it was, I want to tell autonomously generated stories about data, but I want to deliver them as video. Yeah, and that's where Storyline was born between myself and a co-founder. He had a chip on his shoulder from the science he was building at the last firm that didn't quite productize the technology enough. and had co-authored, 28 or so patents over there. He was deeply involved in how to apply AI to data and data science and linguistics. So he was very kind of clear on how do you build a narrative at scale in a very compliant way. And I was basically finding new ways to express data and solve problems on different occasions with different stakeholders. So we had been waiting to work together for about a decade. He's actually my wife's cousin. So I met him early into that relationship. And then finally, there was just a moment. His company ended up selling to Salesforce while he was finalizing his PhD. And my company had sold to private equity. And we both were like, where do we think this is going? And he's like, I want to build a new human information interface. I'm like, what's that? And he says, I don't want to do text. I don't want to do BI tools. He's like, I think there's a new way. He's like, I don't know what it is, but I kind of know it's different than any of the things out there right now. And I said, well, I want to do a Netflix series powered by data. And we both it was one night at in my house. And I mean, I was like midnight. My daughter had just been born. I was probably a little out of it. And we just agreed literally that night. We're like, we're doing this. And so that became the birth of Storyline, where we were like, we weren't going to necessarily focus on a particular industry, but we were going to focus on making video summaries and video first communication and video first intelligence a standard. And we were going to go build the platform to do that.
That's fascinating. And we like even here at System 2, like we do data science, and we, for our own people, we have this like 6-pillar rubric that they need to work on to progress and to become better data scientists. It's everything you might imagine. It's like engineering, statistics, programming, all that stuff. But the last pillar is by far the most important and the hardest, which is communication. You have all these technical skills. You go through all the work of analyzing the data, engineering, cleaning, doing all the steps. And at the very end, you have to tell a story to a human being who's going to then use that information to make a decision. And it is the hardest part of the job, especially for people that tend to skew nerdy. And so I think it's really like fascinating to see your productization of that challenge, especially for technical people that are more challenged when it comes to communicating this. And it's also partly, once you understand the complexity, it's like, well, there's no black or white, there's shades of gray. And that timidity ends up looking like a lack of confidence in the result from someone who is not technical. And they, at the end, they need to make a decision. They don't have the luxury of being like, well, it's this, but it could also be that or this other thing. So how you summarize these findings, incorporating the uncertainty and the risk while still delivering a message that can be acted on, however imperfectly, is a huge challenge. So I want to hear more about how you guys are approaching this and how ultimately you're productizing it and able to do this at scale.
Yeah, well, so I think to the comments that you just made, I've always loved building teams, and most of the time taking people that were kind of diamonds in the rough and just giving them runway to kind of grow into their superpower. I mean, I use that term a lot, but I think the most important thing I've learned about building teams is if the leader doesn't understand what they're great at, that's a real problem. I've been pretty obsessed with it, because I've been obsessed with my fear of financial security since I was young. So like, I was always like, I need to know what I'm good at so I know how I'm going to get to a comfortable place. And then the second was to build a great team, like you need to have an anchor superpower, and then you need to know exactly what superpowers are required to round out that operation to be great, not to survive, but to be great. And so, a good example of that is you got to marry a really powerful thinker who's obsessed with accuracy, who's got curiosity, who's obsessive over problem solving, with somebody that's a great communicator. And, this idea of kind of consolidating multiple problems like that into one person's job can be really harmful. So like the compartmentalization of that, I think, is really important. And I think that's kind of what led to this is, my obsession with communication and storytelling started with the fact that my parents fought a lot. Like I was in a house, my parents fought a lot, my siblings fought a lot. I was kind of quiet and introverted, and, I hated miscommunication, like just at a deep, visceral, like it was harming my home. It was messing up my head. It was throwing off my energy. So I was like, I subconsciously became deeply focused on being articulate and succinct and a great communicator. Like that was the thing I wanted people to recognize. I deserved a seat at a table at a minimum. If it wasn't that I was smart or it wasn't that I was creative, at a minimum, I'm a valuable communicator to help everybody get somewhere faster as a result of using words effectively, right? And so, I think that helped me in marketing, which I came to learn. Communication and being articulate and all that was a helpful ingredient. I think it helped me with data because data can be tremendously paralyzing if you don't know how to make sense of it. So I think understanding how to kind of distill and communicate succinct value out of the data also, I think, helped me create some value there. And then I think storyline became like the ultimate frontier for me because I'm like, let's take 25 minutes of analysis. Let's define it in 2 minutes of a succinct, narrated to you, visually animated way to make sure you are absorbing at as rapid a clip as possible things that matter to you right now. And if we could do that, we were like, well, this is like middleware. This isn't like we're selling storyline as the only company that where we want everybody to do video first because it's just a better first cut of communicating value, period, right? Higher open rates, higher completion rates, higher conversion rates, higher literacy, higher absorption of the content, higher retention rate to recall the information 7 days later. Video breaks every one of those rules that traditional text or traditional data extraction does. And so we're not a replacement. We had to kind of know, what are we here to do and what are we here not to do? We're not here to replace relationships. We're not here to replace PDFs. We're not here to replace BI tools. We're here to say that if you have 2 minutes to either answer a key question you had very efficiently or 2 minutes to inform what discovery journey you want to go on, we think we could actually be best at putting those 2 minutes to use compared to any other alternatives you could use those 2 minutes for. And if we can be successful at that, there's a lot of places that could use a more succinct 2 minutes, right? And so we're in the 2 minute business. And so that was kind of the vision. And then working our way back from that really became, what are the occasions? What industry requires tremendous amount of communication? And that's where we kind of landed. We dabbled in a few industries. We dabbled in real estate. We dabbled in insurance. We dabbled in retail. But there was some serendipitous things that happened that kind of called us into financial services and then even more into wealth management. And I think a combination of the fact that we liked already working with numbers. We liked those numbers being complex and being able to transform that complexity to something usable that was easy to understand, kind of cut through the noise and complexity, and that everyone ultimately cares about their financials. So we're like, wouldn't it be nice if one problem we didn't have to solve was making sure people always cared about the information? So we're like, let's check that box, right? Let's go after people's financial performance, their financial wellness, their financial futures, their retirement, their beneficiary. There's a whole ecosystem of people that deeply care and have urgency around this information. But if you ask them what their biggest friction is with the firms they're paying fees to, it's, I haven't heard from him lately. He sends me these 45-page decks I don't understand. I get very infrequent updates about things. I'm never learning about the market stuff from them first, right? All of the challenges ultimately aren't about they're messing up my future. It's about, man, I wish I got a little better service, right? And the problem with advisors, you may or may not know this, there are two really big tailwinds that we've kind of collected along the way. One is there's $80 trillion that is about to change hands to younger digital natives. That's a new thing that's never occurred in history that is going to require a tremendous amount of high quality communication. And then the second is there is a huge aging out of advisors, the average age, I think, being between 55 or 57. And there's a projected void of a little over 100,000 advisors, according to this McKinsey study, by 2035, 10 years from now. That's 20 million households. It's a significant amount of advice void, right? And so you're like, well, more wealth being transferred, needing better communication, not enough advisors to service the demand. All paths are leading to an alternative means of communicating in a personal way at scale. And we're like, that's exactly what we do. Because if you're not going to do that through video, you're not going to overcome some of the challenges people have, even when they do have access to an advisor today. They're struggling, right? Our focus was, let's augment today's current capabilities. Let's be the first cut of value. Let's move from a quarterly or a biannually review to a monthly highlights reel. Let's allow all the major tech providers in the industry, whether they're creating, portfolio models, rebalancing proposals, market commentary, portfolio reviews, pitching new investment ideas, reviewing research on sectors or industries. All of these are long form, super valuable content that are, in some cases, most cases, dumped on their clients. And I say dumped because they're large, they're difficult to understand for most, whether it's a time constraint, whether it's literally a literacy problem. I can read this, but I don't understand what it means. Connecting it back to some form of, why does this matter to me? Why would this be an opportunity? Are you telling me about robotics because my portfolio is lacking exposure to robotics? Or are you telling me about robotics because you think I have $100,000 I haven't given you yet and you want to tease me to put, like, these things are not clear. They're very gray. They're very inefficient. And a lot of times they generate friction when they're actually intended to generate value. So it's like, I mean, it sounds silly. I can't believe I'm saying this publicly, but like, it actually takes me back to the dysfunction I witnessed as a child. Like I watch these well-intended relationships between the uncle advisor and the nephew, or the parent and the child. And I'm like, you guys both want the same things. You both trust each other. Like, why can't you just communicate better? And what I've noticed is across countries, we're doing work in Switzerland, we're doing work in the US, we're now doing work in Canada. It's all the same. It's all the same, whether you have an advisor or you're a self-serve, direct investing client, it's the same problems. And the reality is the complexity of today's financial services require a little more handholding and a little better storytelling and a better built-in narrative, and they need to be watered more frequently. Fact. That's the key to like lubricating a lot of the friction in the industry. And you're not going to get there through more humans. And I don't think you can design PDFs good enough to outrun that problem. They might get shorter. A lot of them are using better summarization tools, but the core problem is, how do you create a presence of an advisor in their absence at scale? All the topics, update to your financial plan, change of life events, new rebalancing proposal. We're going to pull back your exposure to equities because of the recent tariffs. We're going to pull you back from some of the, international exposure you have because we don't know what's happened. Like, all these little micro things could be generated as video first that gives the advisor credit, gives the client satisfaction, doesn't require scheduling a call, certainly doesn't require a 30-page overview. We're trying to wedge ourselves to play a really valuable role very affordably at scale to help bridge that gap.
I love that throwback to childhood. It reminds me of, I was talking to a friend this summer, and when he got married, he's like a special forces veteran at this point, and didn't have any financial training. But he's like, yeah, when he first got married, he heard about some study that said that 90% of divorces, or some high number of divorces, are caused by financial problems or financial like disagreements. And he's like, knowing that, I'm just getting married. Like, so what his solution was to take a financial course with his wife, because like neither of them knew anything about this. It's like, why don't we just try to get on the same page to avoid some of these issues like later on in our relationship. And it's interesting to hear you talk about that, like within your own family, a lot of families, right? Like, regardless of whether you're rich or poor, like money does tend to come in and cause issues. And oftentimes it's not because there's massive disagreement, because there's just lack of communication, or might be on the same page, but it's hard to feel it at the time, especially when the stress is high. I think it's it's interesting to see this as a solution to just like, it's really, I can talk about communication, but it's much more than that, right? It's emotional. It
Totally.
breaks up families, right? And Yeah, I don't know if you consciously or not intended to basically like, save marriages and families by building this kind of a product.
I mean, I totally see what you're saying. No, I can't say I connected those dots. But yeah, I mean, when we talk about, financial wellness, this like a common phrase that really kind of describes what happens when people feel confident in their plans, and they feel like they've got the right plan. It's proportional to their needs, to their wants, to their dreams. They're working with the right person that they feel can help them execute on that plan. But, I think there's this other thing, which is it's taboo to be insecure about your finances. Like, I think a lot of families in my house, like my dad was never vocally concerned about the finances. My mom was always vocally concerned about the finances, not because there was a concern, but she maybe leaned paranoid, neurotic, and my dad leaned overconfident because he was a value creator and it was like more value could always be created, right? So he didn't spend his time kind of living in the negative energy of fear. He was more energized by the art of the possible. And so I do think that the other challenges, it's sometimes hard for clients to even ask for what they need. And I don't think that a firm's priority should be, I mean, this is like any product, right? It's like, oh, well, let's go see what the consumers are asking for. No, actually, no, the consumers aren't asking for video. I'm like, that's not the question I would be asking as to whether this has a role to play. I would be asking how many of your clients believe they wish they received more functional updates that took less than 5 minutes to be up to speed on the relationship between their plan, the market conditions, and their current portfolio's performance. Go ask that. And then if they come back and say, no, we're good with our once or twice a year thing, never call us back. Unlikely going to be the answer, right? And so I think that's kind of the key is like, you got to deliver something that is creating tension, even if the clients aren't willing to communicate. I'm a 47-year-old man. I'm, middle class. I'm not comfortable saying I don't understand the prospectus you just gave me. Like I have no problem admitting it. After the sale of my last company, I got to work with our first firm, wealth management firm. And, I'm intelligent. And they put 17 private equity offers in front of me and were like, choose the six you like. And I'm like, based on what? Based on the name of the funds, based on the design of the PDFs, like this is not my expertise. And I was like, so even to come to somebody who had means, who's intelligent, like who's a data person, I didn't feel qualified. And I was like, wow, if this is the status quo for how to help clients help themselves create financial wellness, I'm like, we got big problems if you're thinking about the mass affluent who are not, managing large sums of money, you know, they're not going to speak up for themselves or they don't even have an opportunity to complain. Right. And so it's just about leapfrogging something that feels obvious, but that also I think is a huge opportunity to win. Like there are a couple other interesting stats about when the first spouse dies, an advisor has like a 50% chance of losing the account. When the second spouse dies, that goes up like to 80 or 90. And it's because they're not building relationships with anybody but the core stakeholder. Imagine having a portfolio that has a spouse, three beneficiaries, all of which are tied to a plan, an estate plan, which happens, by the way, and everyone is getting updates personalized to their portion of the portfolio. It's not on the advisor to communicate with all five of them in meetings. It's not up to the father or the mother to communicate downstream to all the kids. Like there is a video, it is part of the service, and it is giving everybody their updates. And if they have questions, there's a simple protocol of how they follow up and get them answered. Imagine how different a dynamic could that not retain a huge amount of client relationship value that is actively being lost. These are facts because it's happening, not because it's a fear it might happen. Like this is a great way to expand your ability to provide value at scale far beyond the spouse, all the way down to the beneficiaries. And they might be making their own money outside what they're standing to inherit, right? Like, you've got a first mover advantage there. Again, I just think I think it has to do with the way the industry's worked for so long there's been latency catching up to some of these newer capabilities. But, in a very short period of time, we've actually gotten a lot of recognition that this is a problem that is maybe nobody was waiting to be solved, but they recognize also can't be ignored. And so we're kind of in this phase now where we're starting to actually deploy multiple countries, multiple languages. And this video first thing we think is going to be on a bit of an exponential clip. And we're kind of first in market globally doing this. Our IP is kind of very unique for a compliance regulated industry. But our real goal at the end of the day is to build confidence and trust around financial wellness at scale. And so, yeah, it's a good mission to drive you through some of the technical challenges that arise.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about the videos themselves. How do you solve this challenge of, I mean, yes, like you can, on one hand, you want to scale this, you want it to be as automated as possible. And on the other hand, you need it to be as personal as possible so that they feel like they're talking to their financial advisor. So talk us through what a typical video looks like and how you solve that challenge.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is we treat ourselves like a data platform, not like a video company, right? So video companies out there tend to lean to, I'm going to create a platform that's going to help you do advertising. I'm going to let you include the client name and the account balance and how long you've been a customer and and then I'm going to give you a brochure template and send it out and generate them at scale. Not at all what we do, right? We kind of consider that like Mad Libs, right? You kind of have a few custom fields and you generate kind of a brochure ad based on that. Our episodes, first and foremost, are constructed off of raw data, transaction data, reallocations, proposals, right? So when we work with a partner, we're ingesting their data. And that is the foundation by which episodes can be constructed. So we call them episodes. Number two is it's important to recognize kind of like what use cases can drive the most value. I wanted to kind of maybe like correct, like we're not exclusively saying these videos are meant to represent the advisor. It's a deliverable. That can be a deliverable, literally using the voice of the advisor, which we're now starting. It's really exciting to see that the quality of synthetic voices has gotten good enough. The market, I think, has been desensitized enough where they're like, this isn't as weird as it felt a year ago. I think avatars are also, again, there's still a little bit of a culture shock there, but all of these things are moving in the direction where clients and advisors and like even outside of financial services are going to start trusting, okay, I know this is not really him producing videos, but it is making it more relatable and it is increasing the completion rate and it is making me feel that this is more about me and my, it doesn't feel like you're a number. So they play a role, but we don't require it to be presented as if it's the advisor, right? It could be a generic voice or what have you. The second thing, so you need to define your use cases. Storyline at its core, like we have a catalog of Legos. You want to talk about allocations, you want to talk about contributors, you want to talk about growth of the portfolio, or your, future income projections, right? We have over 100 of these off-the-shelf templates that are pre-powered with your data that you can drag and drop into these episode templates, and then you could render tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of these at a time. And it will pull every client's data in. It will populate all of them, trigger a bunch of animation rules, write the narrative out to an MP3 file in the right voice, submit in a white labeled way that's presented on behalf of your brand, incorporate an avatar if you chose to use one, and then you get to put that in front of a client. And then we track 100% of how they interact with it. Menu systems, what they watch, what they rewatch, last time they watch. And all of that data becomes available to say, do we need a follow-up? Do we not need a follow-up? Do we need to send a reminder? Did they skip something? Did they rewatch something a few times? It can help now inform, is this a pre-meeting briefing? Is this a post-meeting follow-up? Are we going to watch this at the beginning of the meeting and check and see what types of questions we want to discuss? Like there's a variety of different ways to use it, no different than a deck you put together or a PDF or a CSV recap. Some advisors literally send kind of this bespoke CSV template, with all the formulas. So that's kind of one is let's master the occasion. Let's master the types of content that an advisor wants to include. And in some cases, they'll have a version of the template of a portfolio review for ultra high net worth, for high net worth, for mass affluent that have varying levels of detail, varying levels of complexity, varying levels of education pre-built into the narrative, right? So you can think about segment, you could think about the tone. Is it conversational? Is it friendly? Is it professional? And so we kind of factor all of that in to kind of wrap the content in humanity, like humanize the deliverable so that it's easier to receive, more likely to be consumed, and ultimately absorbed so that you can say that value I'm creating has been consumed and recognized. And now we can build on that. And that's called trust, right? That's where referrals come from. That's where retention comes from, right? That's how you navigate turbulent times with certainty, because there's a strong enough foundation of value and communication and frequency that helps you weather the dark times where you literally have no good news to report and all you can be is a trusted voice of reassurance. But that without that foundation is unstable. And that's when people tend to ask, not when will this be over, but am I working with the wrong advisor? And we're like, this is just another tool to help you mitigate those moments.
Before we hit record, we're talking about how difficult it is sometimes to like start a new category, right? You're talking to these advisors that are probably not the most like tech forward people. They know their domain, but they're and this forget about advisors or not. This is a new concept for anybody. Talk to me about that side of it. Like your go to market strategy, how you found it to be to educate your prospects about why they should be doing this, and then getting to where you are today, where it's yeah, like you've gotten past this initial hurdle, and now it's more like okay, like this is how we're gonna do it, not why you should do it in the first place.
Yeah. Well, so, for better or worse, I've had moments where I see a few chess moves ahead, the idea of something that could that could eliminate friction, right? In my last business, it was this thing that few had ever built or invested in. It had a very difficult way to measure ROI, tangibly, but it just seemed like the more brands that were going to build websites and the more money they were going to pour into marketing and the more digital ads they were going to do, there was this building tension that was going to ultimately result in how many customers looked up where those products could be found and what were the most popular stores they were looking at and what markets were getting the most traction. And so we were just like, we wanted to be part of the conversion funnel. And we believed there was a void and that nobody was solving that problem. It's like, I'm doing all this marketing, spending all this money. And then I look at my sales data. And if it goes up, I assume that worked. We're like, but yeah, there's this thing in the middle that could kind of exist in the digital realm that could kind of give you another baseline of understanding that you could convert through. And that was creating a new category, right? We created a new category for a problem that people acknowledge happened, but nobody was like, I'm just waiting for a company to create a locator that's powered by data that could let me search by individual SKU and flavor and size. And I've got a pile of money waiting for it. Like, not the case at all. We had to go build the case of why this thing we thought had a right to exist should, what it's worth, and then ultimately get the industry to believe you need to have it. It's no different than a website or a Facebook page. This is just part of your digital toolbox. With Storyline, I think it was kind of similar. It's like we were packing so much data through the last business's platforms that the paralysis started to become louder and louder and louder. Like we were creating as much paralysis with some users as we were value. Because to see our value, it wasn't to just receive a deliverable. It was to consume it, understand it, and put it to work. And so it was more about the absorption. So there's this really cool kind of new study we latched onto in the last month or two called the value translation gap. And this is across industries, but like in particular, it felt really apropos to kind of what we're doing in financial services. And it basically describes the disconnect between value creation and what's called perceived relevance. And perceived relevance is not like I'm a client, I perceive you are not creating value for me, but I am not receiving the value. And therefore I feel the fees. Right? The goal is never to feel the fees. And so this disconnect is not because necessarily firms aren't creating the value. It's because there is a translation gap, right? And that translation gap is completeness instead of convenience, right? It's It's not prioritizing empathy and being succinct and creating connection. It's prioritizing being compliant, right? And so that concept, we believe, is it's like the humanization is missing, but I don't think you can really wrap a lot of humanization in a BI tool or in a PDF. You could have chat bots and you could have a little avatar. Like there's some things you could do, but at the end of the day, if somebody's going to get their value by doing work versus consume their value because something's being presented to them, I think we're all getting a little lazier. We're all a prompt away from an answer now. It's like even a Google search feels archaic now. It's like the market has moved far beyond this idea that they pay money to do work, right? So how are you going to deliver them value if they don't have 10 minutes, but they have two? If they're not going to look through 40 pages to see what you've done for them. They've got 2 minutes. They'll get to it later, and then they don't get to it later, or they don't understand it, and then they're too embarrassed to tell you about it. And you're like, this is that kind of marriage thing you described. Like it becomes a pretty negative domino effect. And so, I think the problem that needs to be solved there is just really about recognizing there needs to be a different translation engine of that value to that client. Nobody was raising their hands saying that was a problem. I mean, people recognize why friction exists and what clients wish they had it. But again, nobody was saying this year we're going to solve video. Nobody was saying this year we're going to solve going from 2 touch points with clients a year to 10. But when I kind of was doing the math in my head and thinking about the last business and thinking about all these industries who have clients that feel like they pay more than they get in return, it's not because their insurance policy is not great. It's because they don't understand their insurance policy, right? It's not because their portfolio is not great. I mean, there are not great advisors, not great firms. Those exist, but giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, it's often a communication problem. It's often a last mile delivery problem. And it's something that also needs to be consumed by everyone that has the ability to consume things the same way. And the lowest common denominator is don't make me do work. Present me the facts, don't take up a lot of time, and present it to me. Narrate it to me. Tell me what I need to know. Don't make me go find it. Those to me seemed very obvious. And it felt like a matter of time. What do you want to look at? You want to look at TikTok? You want to look at LinkedIn? You want to look at YouTube, all these video education platforms, the fact that my dad's on Instagram and he's, in his 70s. I'm like, what proof do you need that does not exist that video is the preferred way to consume information today? So we showed up with the tool that's not solving a need that anyone has defined, had in their budget. And we're now aligning ourselves, not with every conference and not with every booth to sell a need that people haven't said they had. We were started by aligning ourselves with major industry executives who have spent 30 years working at firms in communication, in business intelligence, in building large networks of advisors, and going through all the evolutions of tools and needs and planning software and all the things that have evolved. They've seen it all, they've touched it all, and they acknowledge that with the great wealth transfer and with the huge void of advisors, new solutions are necessary. And when we put this in front of some really incredible people who we, again, very serendipitously cross paths with, we got some words of reassurance. And it was, this has unmeasurable impact on retention rates. This could transform the way prospecting occurs. This could dramatically increase the number of clients that have an up-to-date financial plan. This could reduce the sales cycle of getting acceptances on rebalancing proposals. This could increase the number of touch points we have with clients a year. Like, this could increase the adoption of new investment ideas. You can just go through the list. And every one of them has a very meaningful, very revenue-driven ROI metric. But it wasn't a need when we showed up, right? So same thing is we had to create the need. So creating a category is creating the need. It's very rare that people create a category that had a built-in need with a built-in budget that was, ready for them. But it's a worthwhile pursuit if you've got conviction. It's a worthwhile pursuit if you find other people willing to work below market value, to sweat and bleed to do it. And then if you get some people in the industry that have seen it all, that recognize this has a place, and it's just a matter of finding the right words in the right moment for the right audience, that's what we chose to bet on. So we didn't raise a ton of money at all. been incredibly resourceful. And we spent time saying we're going to spend our energy on influencers, not TikTok influencers, like industry influencers, people that are trusted, have really powerful Rolodexes, who have connections to firms that are doing transformation that matters. And they are bringing us to people saying, this matters, you matter, you have distribution, they have a way to elevate the quality of your engagement, connect. And that's, we just like, same way I used to go booth by booth. Now it's, we're going financial service firm by financial service firm, country by country, conference by conference. And we're really kind of a combination of demonstrating the product's capability and showing the technology does what we say it does, as advertised, and aligning ourselves with people that recognize even one episode could solve a measurable problem that pays for itself several times over. And that's our journey to video first becoming a standard form of communication. That's really our motto now, is we're trying to make video first the new industry standard communication protocol. And sometimes it's embedded in a technology with a video summary button right next to the PDF download button. And sometimes it's a firm putting out all their market commentary through video so that clients get to see them, talking to them, and get the narrative from them first, rather than a client getting that narrative from somewhere else in market. And that's been our go-to-market approach so far.
Say more about the piece that you alluded to in terms of the go-to-market strategy, relying on senior advisors, like industry experts that are making connections for you. How did you go about structuring that? How do you incentivize them? How have you found that? It sounds like a pretty interesting approach to go on market.
So two things. One, I'm just like a firm believer in like signals from the universe. Like everything good that's ever happened, kind of, I felt like has happened to me. Small little whisper in my ear. And I've just gotten good at making sure my intuition volume is up and act on it. And it's like, it's what helps us feel alive. It's what helps make the pain worth pursuing, because you feel like there's something bigger that you can kind of follow. Than just trying to kind of logistically and logically work your way through life. Right. And so I had a moment where the first ever of these showed up on my doorstep. I went on a vacation in Switzerland. I was staying at this hotel. It was like 10 p.m. This guy had a dog. My daughter, 2.5 years old, ran over to pet the dog. 2.5 hours later, sorry, we're talking. And I tell him what I'm doing. He tells me what he's doing. We end up following up 3 months later. He ends up saying he thinks he can help us in Switzerland. I'm like, we're not really trying to do anything in Switzerland. He's like, are you cool with me spending like €1,000? I'm going to go to this conference. I'm going to do a quick presentation on your behalf. And it's all these bankers like, and I'm like, sure, €1,000, go give it a shot. And I'm like kind of expecting to never talk about it again. Well, right after that, I kid you not, 4 months later, I get a guy who's become now one of my dearest friends of all time, a 25-year software innovator in Switzerland, built some of the most complex software for the most complex bank in performance management, comes in, asks to invest, brings his brother in to invest, brings several others in to invest. They're like, we've been talking about this for 10 years. We never thought anybody would actually do it. Brings me into a board meeting, helps me close our first private bank. Like, when I tell you happened to me, like, not planned, not budgeted. I spent €1,000 on this entire experience, but we ended up learning how much more this vertical could benefit than I ever imagined. And when I kind of stood back and I was like, okay, I'm at this kind of point where I either need to raise more money to go and hire a bunch of enterprise reps, send them to conferences, pay for their alcohol bills and dinners and hotels and flights, hoping that I shake out a contract in a reasonable amount of time. Or I kind of looked at this guy who came into my life at an incredible time, and I was like, I wonder how many more of him there are out there, right? At this unique time in their career, late 40s, early 50s, hungry, large Rolodex, super credible, crazy likable, brilliant. And so I very organically started meeting people, answering a couple LinkedIn things that I would typically ignore. And I was just like, let me just like follow this. Let me just go on like a 30-60 day. Let me just like follow the noise and see if I find a path. And so I kind of did that off the side of my desk, knowing that I got to start making moves. I need a pipeline. I need to start doing something that's more than me. And that led me to a couple guys. They took me to an event in Montana that was this like really cool, intimate, like wealth tech event, very limited invitees. And I got a seat and I met there and I met more people. That event led me to who's now a board member, the guy that put on that event, become an incredible rock at the backbone of our business. That then led me to 4 or 5 other advisors that came out of that event that either loved us for the technology, loved us for the ambition, loved us because we aligned with what their firm's trying to do. And so I just followed that path. But I knew I didn't want to go build a huge sales team where every day I was wondering what they were doing with their time because I didn't have a playbook yet and we were still building a religion. And my advice to anybody building a religion or, creating a category is the last thing to do is build an enterprise sales team because they're going to use outreach, LinkedIn, like all the same tools and AI tools that everyone else is using. Their ability to cut through the noise is not a thing. And they're getting more expensive, not less expensive. So to me, I was like, I need influence. Influence starts with relationships, and relationship starts with somebody seeing that there's something we're doing that they want to be part of. I mean, it was kind of like almost like a movement, right? Because what we were doing wasn't like, we got a better widget than this other widget. It's like, we got a widget nobody asked for, nobody else has. We think there's a huge demand, but we got to go make sure people understand why. And we just happened to find so many people so quickly that like bought in on that. And the compensation was simple. We're spending all of our money on product. I don't even take money from the business. Like, we are building this technology to be as robust and self-service and capable as quickly as we can. They came in, I'm like, but if you want to bet on the business, we used equity exclusively as a way to get them involved. We are building this as a team. I've never been like obsessed with dilution. I've never been obsessed with, being kind of greedy. I've been like, I want as many people that can kind of drive the adoption and help us pull the future forward to kind of have video first become the standard. And it's been incredible. Like, I could not have dreamed of not only the access, the pipeline, the amount we've learned, how quickly we've learned. We have these great calls every couple of weeks. Most of them show up, some don't. Like, it's very fluid. But the knowledge and the passion and the expertise and even how you interact with this person in their way, with their personality, like the amount of time you would have wasted trying to do that the traditional SaaS way, maybe it would have worked. I probably would have had to raise $3-4 million more just to experiment with the alternative. But I would rather raise that less and raise the money when we're ready to scale that playbook rather than raise the money to figure out the playbook. And, I kind of followed it a step at a time and it seemed to be working. And so I kind of took that as a signal to just keep doubling down on that same journey.
Super interesting. So these people are not basically they're at a point in their lives where they don't necessarily need a salary or they have other things going on, and they're doing this for equity, and they're introducing you, bringing you all sorts of leads, and that's phenomenal. Like, you guys are meeting on a regular basis. It's as if you have a sales team, but it's much more like independent contractors, if you will. Like, they're on their own.
Strategic. Yeah.
Yeah, like they don't need to do something if they don't want to, but they're all like motivated, and it's been working out.
Well, I think one of the things, at least specific to some of the people I've interacted with, is they're either kind of late in their career, they're working because they're passionate about it, not necessarily because they need to be. They've kind of like exited the executive role and they're kind of consulting and doing a bunch of interesting things. I think one of the through lines through a lot of them is they hadn't all been, kind of regular angel investors. They hadn't been board members or not, board members on several companies. And they were kind of trying to say, how do I take this expertise, stay active in the game, and continue to build my network and be part of this industry and be part of the transformation without having to clock in and clock out at a big firm. So, I, outside of my, full-time jobs and businesses I've started in the past, I've been a very active angel investor. I've like a little over 39, 40 now investments, and everything from really sophisticated humanoid companies and quantum computing companies to, businesses my friends started that, were very interesting, right? And so I've been on kind of a very repetitive liking to invest in value and connect value and collaborate. And so I think maybe some of what they were excited about was I already started kind of connecting them to some other things I've been involved in, or giving them ideas along the way, kind of a little more entrepreneurial of, hey, there's this event and I think you could play a role there, and you're building a consulting business. Here's a couple other people that you might be able to partner with. Like, I think that we kind of just formed this alliance. And I think the foundation of it was Storyline could be a really interesting company and have an outcome that's worth more than the time you're spending, we hope. But it was also just, there was this mutual connection of this like young entrepreneurial energy, this obsession with transformation, and these folks that were kind of trying to write their next chapter. And I think the two just, they were so kind of synergistic and kind of beautiful. And so like, I feel a significant obligation to make sure that the journey they're on is not just about a financial return with Storyline, but that I can offer them something as emotionally fulfilling as they have given me security and guidance and expertise. And so I'd say there's this symbiotic relationship that's been incredible. I could never have read about it. I could never have strategized for it. But as it unfolded, it was like it might end up being one of the most powerful strategies, almost as powerful as the product itself. Because what's a product without the ability to make an industry care? And like, that's such a huge part of the business model. And it's been really fun to build.
Where do you think you can go from here? I really liked your insight about starting with data that people care about, which is, I think it's just phenomenal, right? It's not just you solve that initial problem, but in curious like that, there are other categories that stand out to me where this would be applicable by healthcare, right? Healthcare data is super relevant. You care, and it's a pain in the ass to get your doctor on the phone. And if it's just even as simple as like getting my blood work back and having a video explaining to me like what's going on or what I could be improving would be interesting. But hey, how are you guys thinking about what other industries to expand into at scale? What will this become?
Yeah. So one of my, call it a mistake, but one of my theories on how our go to market was going to work early on was that we were going to spread really thin, really fast, right? I wanted to generate $1.5 million in real estate, a couple $1 million in retail, $2 million in financial services. Like, the goal was, let's cut one or two use cases across these different domains, build a couple distribution partners, and just kind of scale them. And it would be awesome because I think it truly reflects like the vertical agnosticity of our platform. Like, we are not, limited. We're a communications platform. We're a business intelligence platform. Like, whatever you fuel it with, you can deliver video first communication. However, because we were not this hugely venture funded business, we had to compromise the quality of intelligence based on how many times we were kind of splitting our bandwidth on the data side. And so this ability to really perfect your understanding of a workers' comp claims analysis versus how a brand is trying to secure shelf space at Kroger versus how to communicate a portfolio review versus how to get somebody to renew their health plan in the Netherlands. Like, we were doing all that stuff very quickly. And we then started to feel the pain of, this is too much to be great at all at the same time. So I had to kind of consolidate. The first hard part was not that we're going to only do one industry. It was, what industry we're going to make a really big bet of our time and energy on, because we're going to have to go deep before we're going to harvest any of the fruits of that decision. And so, yeah, for the reasons I gave, like, financial services happened to us in a few ways. So we kind of consolidated. The business model is very much to perfect that. And as we land key use cases, land data, and kind of are built into the fabric, who are the suppliers of data? How are they using it? What are the compliance and regulatory requirements, not just for the industry, but for the industry multiplied times the country? Canada's got different things going on than the US, it's got different things going on than Switzerland. Like, London's got different things going on. So you have to be compliance first. There is this much margin for error. But what we realized is the data that people care about the most is also data that is usually highly regulated. Those two tend to go hand in hand. And so we also wanted to make sure that we're not exclusively operating in a B2B. Our videos, we believe, are most valuable in a B2B2C environment, right? The end user being a client, a homeowner, not like we want to send it out to an analyst and hope that they're going to find value in a video when they're used to mining data for hours on end, right? Like, so getting to that convenience to the end user, consumer, client, etc. So that to us is like there were the holy three trinity. It was financial services. There's a very clear adjacency to insurance, and there's a very clear adjacency from insurance to healthcare. If I had to forward project with enough money raised in time, this spreads to all of them. And there is a consolidated playlist where I go to a doctor or I get a prescription filled. And in addition to what the pharmacist tells me at the counter of CVS, before I even leave the door, I've got a video that's giving me a 2.5 minute summary about the prescription I just filled and what I should look out for, how I should log things, if I'm feeling this, a reminder of what I should take, when I should take it, with visualizations. Like that whole quick 30 seconds, do you have any questions at the counter when you're probably ready to go pick up your kid from school and you're not paying attention? Like, what is that offset by? ChatGPT? Like, wouldn't it be nice if like the company that's providing that like had a video and was aware of the condition you already had and like what medication you took prior? Like, I think we're at an age where we could expect a slightly more prescriptive way to understand this new chemistry I'm introducing in my body has liability and I need to be aware of it. And I need to not like half-ass essentially the consumption of that information, right? And so we know the delivery is flawed because pharmacists are busy and talk fast and sometimes, aren't speaking in clear English, like any of the above, right? And so you're like, well, this solves a pretty big problem. There's a lot of people that fill prescriptions that would love a video they could watch a couple times to make sure that they know what they're doing or get a reminder of why they need to refill or get a reminder of some stuff that just came back from their doctor telling them the highlights of their blood test by only highlighting things that exceeded a threshold of relevance. Like, where are we getting any of that today? I mean, the only thing harder to get a hold of than maybe your advisor or your insurance broker is your doctor, right? So it's like, it's amplified. So I think our vision is we have a role to play in all of that. Whether I'm going to be the guy or whether, it's going to be Storyline or some other company is going to own it to spread, I don't know. But I do know the mission goes far beyond what we're doing now. I'll kind of end on a small little anecdote there. My mother-in-law, who is crazy avid ChatGPT user, refuses to do recipes through any other platform, highly curious. Like, she comes to me maybe 6 months into Storyline and she shows me this printout from her doctor. She had some issues with her knee and, she was on the fence. Do I do surgery? Do I not? What's the recovery? What's the risk? What's the alternative? And so her doctor gives her this write-up, and I kid you not, I couldn't even understand it. Paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs about what the doctor saw and what they think about, non-usable. And she's like, do you think one day Storyline could give me a video of this that might have a diagram of the part of my knee that she's talking about? Because I had to go like look it up because there wasn't like a visual. Like, that would just make this process less painful, right? Not like, wouldn't it be cool? Just like, she was in pain. The friction was so intense and she was standing between a surgery and 6 to 12 weeks of recovery. And it's this piece of paper with paragraphs that were just like haunting her. And it was like, in that moment, I was like, she already understood this AI technology that's like way over here in financial services. And she already connected that. I'm like, if a 78-year-old woman who spent zero of her life in technology is connecting those dots in healthcare, like, that to me was a sign, right? And so, we think there'll be more of those and we're just fighting to have a role to play when that all starts to happen.
That's amazing. And it goes to show how powerful some of these communication techniques are. And video is primal, right? Like, be able to see other people and to receive information that way is, our brains are clearly made to consume information more easily that way. And to do that with information, like data categories that really matter, whether it's your finances or your health is awesome. And it's a cool, really cool company that you guys are building. And also, Really appreciated the lessons that you gave about company building around everything from building a religion from scratch, convincing people that this is a need, to experimenting on a bunch of different things before realizing you got to focus on one and go really deep in financial services. And then yeah, the whole advisor piece was brilliant, to do it in a capital light way, but also get people that are inherently motivated to help you succeed. So David, thank you so much for coming back on to tell us about what you're building. It sounds like a really cool company, and I wish you the best. See more storylines out there
Appreciate it.
on these services that we all use.
Well, thanks so much, Matei. I really appreciate you guys have been great. You should know you are my first ever podcast. And so you were the gatekeeper and you converted me. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing. And you've been just such a great guy to interact with. And so, yeah, I look forward to staying in touch.
For sure. All right. Thanks, David.
All right, Matei. Thanks so much.